Good evening, everybody. You are so welcome.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Maya was an art student in London and was subjected to a lot of abuse following October the 7th.
Manipur, Assam, and Palestine. So, for many of the Marxist, communist scholars, as well as the political parties, Kashmiris or Palestine are comparable.
Many studies have found the same thing in so many different places. I think this has to be considered one of the most robust findings of modern social science.
How do you deal with this? I mean, is the question of policy? And in 2009, 47 countries issued the so-called Terezin Declaration, agreeing to continue and to enhance the efforts to right the economic wrongs during the Holocaust.
This is absolutely fantastic. I think it's so important that academics from all over the world are coming to London to engage in conversations surrounding Jew hatred, of course, Jewish identity. I think it points to a more strategic response from the Jewish Academy to what we're seeing with regards to rising rates of Jew hatred around the world.
So the connection is brought very much to the fore by Eric Ward, who is an African-American black researcher and a senior fellow formerly of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
That's from EU law. That's where that comes from. So I'll be curious to see if there's some kind of like knock-on effect from the DSA outside of Europe. And this is where that Brussels effect has the potential.
She's one of my interviewees. I was really honored that she allowed me to interview her for my third book. And her chapter is about integration and duality.
Occupied with the British discourse and the story of British Jewry in this syllabus. Going further back to my doctoral research on women in Britain's fascist movement, I grappled with how to deal with these women's anti-Semitism.
What actually works? What actually has an impact?
And I'm wearing my tartan kippah and I'm watching the King and Queen. I thought, that's it. Because I'm not leaving my Jewishness at the door. I'm bringing it in and I'm making it part of who I am. We don't need to choose.
Because I was always an activist and a student, and I couldn't understand that all the organizations that I thought were going to support me were actually very much against us from day one.
The points that were being made and staged about the seriousness with which some organizations take or don't take their research into anti-Semitism is really important. And just as a reminder of how necessary it is for researchers' data to be accurate and done with the necessary care. I would absolutely recommend coming to events like this conference on anti-Semitism, because we are facing such a difficult and important time for understanding the issues that Jews are facing this 21st century. So events like this are so important.
And I think everyone should be at this conference to learn. We have to continue our learning. It's vital.
Again, you are incredibly welcome. And I want to say a word about Robert Fine, after whom this lecture series is named. I'm very proud to play a role in keeping his name alive, keeping his face out there. Robert was very special to me and to a number of other people here and connected to the centre. Robert died prematurely, really, He was my PhD supervisor, and really pleased that everybody is reminded of him once a year by us. Hopefully it will inspire some of us to go and read his work, which would make me very, very happy. I would like to also thank, in a very profound way, and not in a tick box way, the University of Westminster and Dibyesh Anand, who is the something Vice Chancellor of EDI something, thank you, and some colleagues from the University of Westminster also. But what I mean when I'm saying it's not a tick box thank, Dibyesh does not just rent us a room. He gives us a room. In fact, he gave us 2 rooms and 3 rooms. And he does not just give us a room, but he allows us to be part of the community of scholarship that is the University of Westminster with regularity. And that means a lot to us. And it means a lot to us in part because there is so much of the community of scholarship that we ought to be at home in, that ought to be part of our community that we are absolutely pushed out of and alienated from. So a huge thanks to Dibyesh and to Sylvie and everyone here at the University of Westminster, including, I believe, the VC, who is also supportive. Dibyesh should be here to welcome you. Unfortunately, he has had to travel for some very grave family reasons. But I have a statement from Dibyesh that I would like to read out. Dear guests, I am sorry that I could not be here to welcome you all to the University of Westminster and reiterate our resolve to be a place where we challenge all prejudices, including anti-Semitism, and celebrate diversities, including the belonging of Jewish students and colleagues. I had to be away to attend a family emergency. Universities have to be safe spaces for all, and no person should have to invisibilize themselves to feel safe. Yet we hear of some Jewish students and colleagues not feeling they can be visible about their Jewishness due to anti-Semitism. This is unacceptable. We are determined to work together with you. We are grateful to the organisers as well as the keynote lecturer, Dr. Dave Rich, MBE, for all the work they do to make our society a better place. Thank you. And there are a lot of fine words come out of academia, and from Dibyesh, it's more than fine words. It's really warm and loving and collegiate material support. So thank you, Dibyesh, and we wish you and your family all the very best. Also, for example, I would like to thank warm-heartedly, I think there are 5 security guys around the building paid for by the University of Westminster who work for the University of Westminster. So heartfelt thank you to them and to the CST also, who we have had discussions with about how to keep us safe. I was told that we're very, very welcome here, and we know that because usually it is so cold in these lecture theatres. And for us, they've really stoked up the boiler, I'm told. So I think we should take that as a compliment, but if it's too warm, then apologies, I'm sure. Let me go quickly through today's programme. We just heard from Dibyesh. In a moment, we're going to have the awarding of the Pete Newbon Award for 2025. After that, we will have the announcement of the London Centre for the Study of Contemporary Anti-Semitism book prize, £1,000 book prize. And after that, I will say a few more things about the project that we're involved in and that we're passionate about, And then we will buy you a drink, and we'll go into the other room, I think through these doors at the bottom. And people can have a drink and socialize and meet each other. This is our annual event, kind of our Christmas party, right? Or our Hanukkah party, or our end of year coming together, but the coming together in real life, face to face, very important to me. We don't do it too often, and you're all very warmly welcome to be here, so thank you. After the reception, and there are some of the authors here, and there will be some book signing, we come to the main event, which is the Robert Fine Memorial Lecture, which will be given by Dave Rich. So that's the thing that I'm always, whenever I write something, I'm told I should do all that signposting before I get straight into it, and I'm stubbornly resistant to it. This is in the wrong place, because you just heard from Divyesh. So let me move to the Pete Newbon Award for the greatest contribution to the public understanding of anti-Semitism. It's 4 years in a month or so since Pete's death. And there are many people in this room and many people on the live stream. By the way, we have a brilliant live stream going out there. We didn't tell you, any of you, about it because we wanted you to come. But as soon as you were safely on your way, then we put the mailing out about the live stream. Pete is remembered and still missed wholeheartedly by many different people in a whole number of ways, and not least by his community of people who fought with him alongside anti-Semitism. I would like to introduce the chair of the judges, or a spokesperson for the judges, who is Heidi Bakram, who was also last year's winner of the Pete Newbon Award, and very, very deserved winner she was too. Heidi, I think since October the 7th, has really put her energy and her focus into campaigning. There was a family member who was lost in Gaza, of Heidi's and her husband, and well, tragically that family member did not come back. Heidi has been doing the most amazing work, especially in Brighton, drawing attention to the story of 7th of October and the meaning of it and the arguments around it. So Heidi, please come up to the stage. Oh, well, do come up to the stage, but let me also, or in fact, you can either, come. I wanted to introduce the other two judges quickly too. Rachel Moiselle, people will have seen online, if they are on any social media, I think. Rachel is extraordinary. She is, in a very real sense, in a kind of cauldron country of contemporary anti-Semitism, which is Ireland. She lives in Dublin. She's been fighting anti-Semitism in Irish discourse and in Irish life like a lion. And she was one of the judges. And the other judge is Jen Gerber, who people might remember was, she ran Labour Friends of Israel right through the Corbyn years. I see Louise Ellman is here. Amazing people are here today. Louise Ellman was an MP, a Labour MP, and is now in the House of Lords. Louise and Luciana Berger were two women, Jewish Labour MPs in the city of Liverpool, and neither of them survived politically the Corbyn years. Jen Gerber ran Labour Friends of Israel during that time and has been a member of our Board of Trustees as we have set up and run for the last 3 years. Jen has just stood down from that role, but we love her and very much appreciate everything that she's done, actually. Heidi, the nominees.
Hi, everyone. When LCSCA asked me to be one of the judges for this year's Pete Newbon Award, I was deeply honored. And it reminded me of time past, a whole year, a very long one. For us as a family, one of the worst. In February, we got the dreaded confirmation that my husband's cousin Zahi was not coming out of Gaza alive. When I stood here last year accepting this beautiful award, we were still fighting for him. 2 months later, the last flicker of hope was extinguished 30,000 feet in the air on a flight hastily arranged to Israel. Suddenly, we were flying to a funeral and not a reunion. We stood in front of Zahi's coffin alongside hundreds of mourners with no spaces between us. We were physically and emotionally squeezed together. As Zahi's wife Gali spoke, waves of anguish flowed outwards. We convulsed and contracted. One body of pain, the very atoms charged with grief. It created an invisible web that held us up when all we wanted to do was collapse. I see the same echoes of grief and connection and strength with this award. Pete fought hard. He was snatched from us so sharply that it supercharged the same sort of energized anguish. They feel the same because they are, because it's all connected. My fellow judges were the wonderful Rachel Moselle and the brilliant Jennifer Gerber, who I believe is stuck on a tube somewhere on the Northern Line. And I knew Rachel already from social media and had met her in person actually at an LCSCA conference. And I hadn't met Jennifer, yet we quickly fell together into an easy flow, an instant bond of mutual respect and sisterly warmth. It made a difficult decision much less fraught, and I really thank them for that. It was a true pleasure to work with them. There were so many strong nominations, as you can see. I guess because this has been a very good year for anti-Semites. We have needed every single one of those nominees and more. Needed them like we need life rafts. This was the year when deadly anti-Semitism came to the doors of a synagogue and stole even more from us. So we commend every fighter in all the ways that this battle can be waged. This is a mission that calls us all. The Pete Newbon Award is for public awareness of anti-Semitism. Of course, we would not be here today to be aware of the award of awareness if it were not for LCSCA and David Hirsch. They are stationed on our most challenging front lines and are fighting with everything they've got. When we had to choose the winner of the award, it was very hard because each one of our 3 nominees are so very impressive. We decided we wanted to honor them all in some way, so we will present them with something to recognize their incredible contribution, and then I'll announce our winner. So first, this person has been steadfast in the fight. She was there up to the knees in the muck of Labour anti-Semitism, fighting alongside Pete. Her attention to detail and willingness to go toe-to-toe with the haters is a truly treasured quality. She is both dogged and brave. So, for her dedication to the fight against anti-Semitism, please come up and receive your special recognition, Gillian Lazarus. This person has been the bane of the Beeb. He has exposed more institutional anti-Semitism than anyone I know. I am positive great groans echo around the hallways of organizations when they see one of his exposés coming. For his contribution to exposing anti-Semitism in institutions, please come up and receive your special recognition, David Collier. Are we doing a photo?
Sure.
We have to do a photo with everyone. Over a bit more. So, I guess it's no surprise to who will receive the award this year. Don't make me cry. She was nominated last year, and if you can believe it, she's done even more since then. She works harder than anyone I know and is laser focused. She exposed anti-Semitism across the music industry, academia, unions, the NHS, among celebrities. I was honored to speak alongside her at a recent feminist event, a fringe event. Sitting beside her, it felt like real change was possible. Her work ethic is exhausting. In all the horror, she still manages to keep reminding us of the allies we have, of the joy to be found and the fun to be had. For the greatest contribution to the public understanding of anti-Semitism, 2025, please come and accept your award, Nicole Lampert.
Ah, you have a trophy.
All right, I will give you Nicole Lampert.
I hope you can hear me because I'm quite short. I didn't expect to get this actually, so I haven't done a speech. But I want to thank Jeremy Corbyn to start off with, because if it wasn't for him, then I would probably just still be writing tittle-tattle about celebrities. Jeremy Corbyn, thanks to him, I started writing online, and I met the wonderful Pete, who this award is named after. When I say met, like lots of people, we formed a relationship online. I never met him in real life, I'm sad to say. But he was always there with his humor. For me, it was always very exciting to have an actual academic talk to me and treat me with respect. And we all miss him and his humor very much. Thanks to Corbyn, I met Heidi, and I met the three great Davids of the anti-Semitism world, the wonderful David Hirsch here, the brilliant David Collier, my fellow nominee, and Dave Rich, of course, who are all kind of my linchpins, the people I look at and often go to for advice. Gillian, also fellow nominee, is another person that I've met in this fight. She's amazing the way she wades through the absolute hell of these horrendous groups. She exposes the hatred, and just also a special word for David, who for me has broke the story of the year in every way, whether showbiz way, entertainment, but also by the way he stopped and really made the BBC stop and think, or should have done at least. But we do know from at least one of the reports that when they have a documentary now, they do say, what would David Collier say about this? There's no greater accolade than that. It's great to be here amongst so many friends, and thanks to Jeremy Corbyn, I know at least half of the room, and I wouldn't have known almost any of you before that time. I want to particularly thank my Labour Against Antisemitism friends. Many of you are here and who are always there for advice. My journalist friends. So just on Friday, I can say, can you give me some ideas of where Israel has been cancelled? And within 5 minutes, I have 10 ideas being thrown at me. Editors like Jake, my feminist friends, my friends from the entertainment industry. Today here, it feels like we are family, and that's what we need more of, because the war is over, or there's certainly a ceasefire, a fragile ceasefire, but this war that we are in continues. And I think we're not fighting it well enough. We're not fighting it together, and that's something that I implore all of us to do, to meet each other in the break here and to talk and to figure out how we fight this bigger war against us, against world Jewry, because otherwise we don't have a future in this country. I want to try and end it on, I suppose, a happy note. I'm having just spoken to someone from the Jewish community in Birmingham and having a look at what the medics are going through, looking at Eurovision. All I can say is that we have right on our side. We've been here before. We can get through it. And thanks to all the amazing people in here, we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Congratulations. Nicole didn't mention that she was the one who, I think it's fair to say, broke the story about Gary Lineker. And she did that by being a very smart journalist, and he was not particularly smart because he completely underestimated her when he saw her, and she asked questions, and he thought, oh, I can talk this chick round. He didn't. He lost his job. Rightly so. And Nicole has done sterling work on many things. I am aware that I need to move things along, in part because I have set the press releases to go out at exactly 6:45, and it would be a shame if the winner of the book prize was announced there before it was announced here. I think I have 120 seconds to go. Unfortunately, none of the judges could be here, but I have huge respect for all three of the judges. Daniel Chanilla was a student of Robert Fine at Warwick University, has been a great friend and colleague ever since we studied together with Robert. He's in Chile. It's the, a university in Santiago. You can pronounce it. Daniel is fantastic and a really profound and serious social theorist and a fellow of the London Centre. Maiken Umbach is also somebody I met, she is somebody I met fairly recently. Maiken is the academic advisor to the National Holocaust Museum in Nottinghamshire. And honestly, I kind of knew about it for a long time, but I never went up there and I never really made it my business to find out what they do and how. And I think that was my error. I think the National Holocaust Museum is fantastic. It's really interesting. It's run by people who are not Jewish in a neighborhood that is not Jewish for predominantly people who are not Jewish, and they educate about the Holocaust. So Maiken is doing fantastic work with them. Pamela Walker is also a fantastic colleague. I spend a lot of time traveling, going to events and conferences and this and that, and I met Pamela in fact, Pamela got in touch with me before I traveled and said, why is everybody in my department anti-Semitic? She said, I'm not Jewish. In fact, she's a Christian. And she said, what's going on here? Can you help me? And, well, I tried. But Pamela is doing great work at Carleton University in Ottawa, with a little bit of my help, but mainly with her own help. So, 3 brilliant judges. The nominees are Ben Freeman, the Jews and Indigenous people, Brendan O'Neill, After the Pogrom, Douglas Murray, On Democracies and Death Cults, Eli Sharabi, Hostage, and Jake Wallace-Simons, who is, I think, the only one of the group who is here. Made the effort, he says, grumpily. You're very welcome, Jake. Those are the nominations. And I think the press release is going out this second, strangely, so I will tell you who won the prize, and it is Eli Sharabi. This is my friend and colleague, Daniel Cianillo, and he will say something about Eli Sharabi's book on behalf of the judges.
Good evening from Santiago. I have great pleasure in speaking to you on behalf of the judges for the London Centre for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism Book Prize. Eli Sharabi has written a profoundly moving book. Its value lies in the paradox that we wish it never had to be written at all, but we're simultaneously grateful that he found the bravery to do so. In the midst of the most brutal circumstances, Sharabi's determination to survive his kidnapping by Hamas leads us into a soul-searching journey of hunger and solidarity, family and friendship, identity and humiliation, human values and hatred. Through his multiple conversations with his captors, Sharabi also depicts their terrifying worldview. What emerges about their motivations is a terrifying cocktail of a visceral and largely unreflected set of anti-Jewish myths, mixed with a personal ambition and a quest for self-advancement. Antisemitism, in this instance, as indeed in many others, is less a coherent theory as a crazed fantasy in which a nicer world will magically emerge, if only it has no Jews in it. During the 16 months of his ordeal, Sharabi's only certainty was his conviction that his people had not forgotten those in captivity. As he returned to life, he discovered that his wife, daughters, and brothers had been killed. Yet he found the moral strength to gift us with this precious book. So many congratulations to Eli Sharabi for having written such an important work. Good night.
Good evening. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to the London Centre of the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism for honoring my book Hostage with this award. This means so much to me. Your center's work researching, exposing, and challenging contemporary antisemitism is invaluable. In these times, when British Jews are facing an atmosphere of uncertainty and rising hostility, your commitment to clarity, truth, and academic rigor provides both strength and reassurance. Hostage was written to shed light on a reality that should never be ignored, and knowing that it resonates with a community so deeply engaged in combating hatred is extremely meaningful. Thank you, not just for this recognition, but for the essential work you do every day.
Eli is an extraordinary man. The book is an extraordinary book. My daughter up there tells me that he's going to be the next Prime Minister of Israel. And you can buy his book at the reception in a little while. Eli donated his £1,000 to Kisharon Langdon, who say that they are deeply honoured that Eli Sharabi has decided to donate the prize to us. These funds will go towards our life-changing services supporting Jewish people with learning disabilities and autistic people and enabling them to thrive. We know this is a cause close to Ellie's heart, and we are very grateful that he has chosen us as his charity to receive this meaningful contribution. So, amazing piece of generosity, and some of my very favourite people also are autistic. So now I'm going to introduce myself.
Hirsch, Zionist, David Hirsch, Zionist, David Hirsch, Zionist, 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 David Hirsch, David Hirsch, David Hirsch, David Hirsch, Zionist, Zionist, Zionist,
Zionist, Zionists,
Zionist,
Zionist, Zionist, Zionist, Zionist, Zionist, Zionist, Zionist,
Zionist, Zionist,
Zionist, Zionists,
Zionist, Zionist, David Hirsch.
I want to say a few words about the London Centre. People will remember that we had our conference and our big launch event planned for the 11th of September 2022. And people will remember that Her Majesty the Queen died on the 8th of September and messed up all our plans. The conference did go ahead and it was very successful. And I want to tell you something about what we do and why, and I want to tell you something about the progress that we made. When I booked the Bloomsbury Theatre for the launch event, I signed a contract to rent the theatre before we had collected the money to pay for it. I'm hoping, oh gosh, I'm not even sure that that was in fact before we were legally constituted, but my board would slaughter me if I did something like that now. But we didn't have a bank account, we didn't have any money, we didn't have anything, but we did have a community of support and we had a community of scholars. And that's the basis from which we developed. In a sense, what we do is quite inherently, I've been trying to work out if it's elite or elitist, but what we do is to take the arguments and the evidence and the discussions about anti-Semitism into the very highest and most sophisticated levels of our society, which is focused around the universities. And I think it's fair to say that not everybody can do that. We can do that, and we want to do that, and we need support. And it's one of the things about this project is that we have always had a community of support around us, a community of people who felt that what we were doing was important to them. And firstly, I want to thank all of those people who have supported us with no matter how small or large amounts of money, and who have volunteered and who have just been there for us, with us, helping us. So that's where we started. We constituted the London Centre as a legal entity with charitable status on the 23rd of June 2022. And I mean, some of the friends that have been with us and helping us around are here now, many of them. Ricky Cousins is doing the videoing, he's doing the live stream that you're not allowed, and other people in this room, such as Lacroix, who's doing the photography, people who we knew at the beginning or who we have met along the way, and they make us feel brilliant. Our board of trustees are chaired by Michael Salberg. Michael spent a career in the ADL, leading their anti-Semitism work around the world outside of America. He was then at the Conference of Presidents in the US. He still lives in New York, and he's one of our trustees, which is absolutely fantastic that we have somebody so at home in the American Jewish community. And Michael is now our chair. Howard Woolman is here. Derek Spitz is here. I think Charlotte Henry is not here. And Stuart Adams is probably in Brazil. But 4 brilliant board members who, apart from anything else, have to put up with me and my kind of mania to push ahead, really, to rent rooms when we don't yet have the money and to not worry too much about all the things that bore my little ADHD brain, but I have them to look after me and us and the organization, and they do a fantastic job. So thank you to them. Lots of friends in this room. Howard Jacobson was the first Robert Fine Memorial Lecturer. He gave an absolutely memorable lecture 2 weeks after the 7th of October, when we weren't sure about many things. We weren't sure how to think. We weren't sure whether we could do an event. We weren't sure if it was appropriate to have music at the event or not. Everything was up in the air, and Howard was brilliant. Although I think he himself was quite nervous, which was brilliant to see. I'm always nervous when I speak, and to see a nervous Howard Jacobson was something to behold, actually. So thank you for coming today, Howard. What are we here for, and what do we do? We are not just another organization that fights anti-Semitism. We think that we have a unique ability and duty to organize in the universities. Everybody knows that the universities are, everybody who understands anything about anti-Semitism knows that the universities are one of the key places in which anti-Semitism is important. It's important because at the highest levels of sophisticated thinking, there is a lot of anti-Semitism, and that's something that hasn't been the case since the Holocaust, I think. It has been the case in the past. There is a proud tradition of anti-Semitic professors, and that is something important about the world that we live in. Now, how do we relate to that? Sometimes it's tempting to look at some of the things that are tolerated in the universities and just say the universities are finished and they are dead and we just need to get out and we need to do our thinking and our teaching and everything somewhere else. We're not prepared to do that. We're not prepared to concede defeat in the universities or at the highest level of scholarship. So our objectives, number one, is to challenge the intellectual underpinnings of anti-Semitism in public life. We're not just a simple kind of think tank who does research. We do research. We do a lot of research, and our fellows do a lot of research. But we do it in order to engage, which is a nice turn of phrase, because Engage was the organization through which we fought the boycott back to 2005, and with which we fought anti-Semitism, and people can still find the old Engage website at engage.org.uk. We engage within the disciplines. Lots of people do really great work. For example, the best of it perhaps in this country is done by UJS in supporting students and educating students and organizing them politically and socially. It's great. And everybody else kind of wants to be on campus. But the problem, as I see it, is that when those students get into the lecture theatre and are taught to embrace an anti-Semitic framework of one kind or another of thinking, and they are given anti-Semitic books on their reading list, and they are taught what is okay and what is not okay, and challenging contemporary anti-Semitism is not okay. So when people get into the lecture theatres, into the conferences, when they try to get published in the journals, when they try to get their books published, when they try to get an academic job, when they try to get promoted. They rely on peer review, and they rely on being embraced by the culture that already exists. And in too many places, the culture in the social sciences and the humanities and beyond are such that people who do what we do could not succeed. So, firstly, we are a community of scholarship. You pay with your taxes for many communities of scholarship. They are called universities. But we are not really allowed to do the work that we do in them. We are allowed to be in them, some of us, although I know many, many people who were great students, great grad students, wrote great books, wrote great papers, and could never get academic jobs. In fact, there are very few people in this country doing research on contemporary anti-Semitism professionally in a university. Very few people. There are a number of people who are retired and who are doing it. There are a number of people who earn their living doing something else in academia, but who do a little bit of this on the side. So the communities of scholarship that our society builds are places that we feel locked out of. I said I do a lot of traveling, and I meet a lot of people, and I used to kind of ask people, why don't you come and be a fellow of the London Centre? And at some point, it was quite obvious to me, and it should have been obvious to me a long time before, this is not a professional way to behave. So we put out a call for applications, and we said, if you want to be a fellow of the London Centre, send us an email to tell us how your values align with ours, and send us a CV, and send us some of your scholarship. And we were inundated with people wanting to join us. I still have this thing, and I still have it. It's quite difficult to get rid of this idea that people don't want to associate themselves with us because it will destroy their career. And there is something in that. But what we found was that there were, I think there's about 110 people, faces on that image, who do want to be associated with us and who are courageous and brilliant, and I'm very proud of every single one of them, and many of them are in this room today. And with a community of scholarship, we need an infrastructure of scholarship. We have been pushing forward with international collaboration that I think I'm very proud of. People will know that this year, in March, we had a really successful conference at JW3 because we couldn't get a university venue. I'm not sure why. There were brilliant art exhibitions running through the conference. I think Mina Kupferman is here somewhere. I think Maya, oh God, I always stumble on your second name, Maya. Maya is here also. And Marami. The collaboration we did was to collaborate with Haifa, the Compes Center at the University of Haifa, to create London, Contemporary Antisemitism London 2025. And coming up in March is Contemporary Antisemitism Haifa 2026, which is going to be fantastic. They have had such a big response to their call for papers. There are going to be tracks on tech and AI that are going to be in the tech campus in Haifa, and anti-Semitism and sport that is going to be in the football stadium at Haifa, and anti-Semitism and art that is going to be in the art gallery at Haifa. Is going to be a fantastic conference. And the following year, we are also collaborating with the Gratz College, which is in Philadelphia. And the following year, there will be Contemporary Anti-Semitism Philadelphia 2027. And I'm sure that that will be just a huge and brilliant event, especially in North America. We are also collaborating with the granddaddy institution of them all, actually, which is the Indiana Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. Alvin Rosenfeld was one of the first people to build a Jewish studies department at Indiana, and he was the first person that I know of to build an institute for the study of contemporary antisemitism. and they are on board with us. One of the things I'm really proud of is our book series. We need to create conferences, book publishing, journal publishing, the infrastructure of scholarship. And people can look at those books downstairs, but I think we don't yet have Peter Hacker's new book. Oh, we do. We have copies of Peter Hacker, which is published, I think, this week. Peter Hacker is an Oxford philosopher who wrote, I think, one of the most important books on Wittgenstein. And in late age, I think it's fair to say, he sat down and wrote about Hamas and about contemporary anti-Semitism. And even though he is a great Oxford scholar, he could not get a book on this topic published. And he was recommended to come to us, and we said, yeah. We said, yeah, we can do that. John Strawson, who's here, and Philip Spencer, who's also here, work on the book publishing project, and we're trying to bring more people in because we need more people to read and to help people get their manuscripts into shape. John Strawson worked with Peter Hacker, and the book is now out, and I'm so proud of all that stuff. Danny. Oh, 5 minutes. Very quickly, one of the things about the London Centre is that we are nimble, we have convening power, we have respect. That's a picture of an event that we did in King's and in the House of Lords on Islamist anti-Semitism. We did it following the attack on the synagogue in Manchester and following the banning of Israeli football fans from Birmingham. And there are a number of things that we can do quickly and well, and that's one of our strengths. I want to introduce to you, I think Jo thought she got away with it because of time. I want to introduce you to Jo de Geer, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And firstly, you probably do all know her, but you should all know her. Jo runs the centre. It's astonishing to me, and it's absolutely brilliant to me that I've noticed over the last year and 6 months especially, things have begun to start happening that I don't know about, right? It is brilliant. Events happen where my face is not on the platform, and Jo is beginning to build and run an institution that is something that is big and strong and getting stronger and is ambitious. Jo.
Okay, I'll be... Thank you. I'll be really, really quick, because we could all do with a drink. So, as the COO, I get to come on and briefly talk about the nuts and bolts, the boring but necessary stuff. I make sure everyone's wearing their seatbelts so the centre can fly. It's basically my job. I've been in post for 18 months, and in that time we've established lots of things, but off the top of my head, a budget. We now have a proper functional budget. Hurrah. Bookkeeping. Our books are now Charity Commission compliant. Also good. A properly serviced board who are fully across all of our policies and our strategies. We are officially no longer in the toddler stage. We have grown. We have recruited new people to our merry band. We have Yvonne Maxwell, who is head of volunteers at the back. We have Dean Lesser, who is our new fundraising manager, also at the back. We have Mary Westhover, who isn't here because she's got tonsillitis. She's our new publishing administrator who's been managing the book series that David put the slide up about earlier. We basically are in a position where we have now achieved legal best practice. Basically, the nuts and bolts can now have the whistles and bells added. Our foundations are firmly established. The future looks very bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. So here's the smiley Joe, and here's the Joe who's running things. And I love that picture. I don't think Joe loves it so much. So now I'm supposed to ask you all for money. I'll do that a little bit, but to be honest, I think that the people in this room are already our friends, and the people in this room are already giving what they can give, and the people in this room are giving us money and time and energy and support and love. So I won't really ask, I mean, yeah, give us money if you like, and we need money, but go and talk to other people. If you know rich people, if you know influential people, even if you know people who aren't especially rich and influential, but we have a community of people who give £10 a month. Some of them give 2, some of them give 30, and we value that community so much, and that community needs to grow. We also need to talk to people who can give us more serious money, because I would say a little bit stronger than Joe did, we have built a compliant and serious institution. The reason we've done that is because we are hugely ambitious, because our ambition, which is not one that we chose, but one that was, to use a rather Marxist phrase, given to us by history, our task is to change the way people think in democratic states and at the very highest and most sophisticated level. So that's not bells and whistles, that's millions of pounds. Millions. That's, we're so proud because we now have an office with like 4 people, and, you know, others too. I mean, also Danny Louise, who organizes our events. But we need an office with, 50 people, 100 people. We need academics in every discipline that is relevant and in every university. So we're not playing and we're not pissing about. We need to change how people think at the very highest and most sophisticated level. Because when our colleagues in universities are telling the public that Israel murders children and that the overwhelming majority of Jews are complicit, then we should not be surprised when people take things into their own hands. And the attack on the synagogue in Manchester was preceded by a shout of, "This is for the babies that you murdered." And that claim has professorial weight. And we have to do what we can to challenge that. We do it in a scholarly way. We're academics. We're, real academics. We're not just people who are kind of shouting at profs who don't really understand what's going on. There are people in our community who understand critical theory better than the critical theorists, and who understand Marxism better than the Marxists, and who understand liberal theory better than the liberal theorists and their critics, and who understand postmodernism better than the postmodernists. And we will fight tooth and nail for a better way of thinking, and we will hopefully get people into academic positions where they can teach, where they can research, where they can write. I go ask people for money, and I say, we need more research funding. And they kind of roll their eyes and go, well, we know enough, don't we? We don't need to do more research. Now is the time for action. And you have to then sit down and explain that in academia, research is action. You don't get into an argument with Judith Butler by knocking on her door or turning up at her event and putting your hand up. You get into an argument with Judith Butler by doing a master's course and a PhD and a postdoc, and by writing a book or 2, and by teaching students, and by putting yourself in a position where you can do that. And if we are to bring together communities of scholars with an infrastructure of scholarship, then we need to be very, very strong. So, having told you a story of our brilliant progress that I am very proud of, we haven't even started yet because we have a lot to do. So if you do want to give us some money, please do. Please talk to people that you know. Do what you can for us as scholars and as our community of support, and help us to find the really serious money that will enable us to compete with those who are financed by people with really serious money. Thank you very much. So please come and have a drink, and we will be back in 30 minutes for the main event, which is Dave Rich. Thank you. It has the wrong date on it, but it's too good not to use. People were asking me, how much did you pay for that billboard? I would like to introduce to you a friend and very brilliant colleague, Joanna Mitchlick. Joanna lives near us in East Finchley, and she comes from the place where my people come from in Łódź in Poland. Joanna is a scholar, a leading social and cultural historian of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, nationalism, and East European Jewish childhood. Her work has reshaped the fields of Holocaust history and memory by illuminating the experiences of Jewish children and families, and by examining the complex moral and political legacies of the Holocaust in contemporary post-communist Europe. In 23 and 24, she was a full professor visiting at the University of Lund in Sweden. It is a scandal that she is not a properly tenured professor somewhere, and the fact that she is not will tell you something about the difficulties of being an academic who takes contemporary anti-Semitism seriously. I could list to you many, many people who we would like to support and help to be doing research and writing and teaching, and Joanna is at the top of the list. Joanna, I'd like to invite you to come up and to take over from me on behalf of the London Centre and to chair the Robert Fine Memorial Lecture. Joanna.
Thank you, David. So good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Robert Fine Memorial Lecture. It is a great pleasure to see all of you in this hall for what has already become a vital annual event of nuanced reflection, first-class scholarship, and public engagement. Let me begin by briefly reflecting on the mission of our center, because it provides the intellectual and ethical foundations for gatherings such as this one tonight. The center, our center, aims to create a rigorous, honest, and courageous space for understanding anti-Semitism as it manifests today. As David already mentioned, we bring together local, national, and international researchers, writers, journalists, educators, and community voices to illuminate the mechanisms by which anti-Semitism adapts itself to new political, social, cultural, and technological conditions. We aim to expose the distortions and falsehoods that shape public discourse and to foster evidence-based scholarship that speaks directly to the urgent challenges of our time. outside observers have recognized our center's significance. One commentator described it as a rare space where difficult questions can be researched empirically and debated without intimidation or ideological policing. Such assessments capture something essential, that the center fills a vacuum. It stands not only for academic excellence, but for public courage. This evening's lecture continues that tradition, and it is worth remembering how this tradition began. At our first annual Robert Fine Lecture, the distinguished novelist Howard Jacobson offered a brilliant and wide-ranging reflection on contemporary Jewish anxieties and the phenomenon of self-hating Jew. And we are delighted that he's here with us tonight. In that lecture, he mentioned Dr. Dave Rich as an analyst whose work helped illuminate the strange and shifting forms of anti-Semitism. It is therefore particularly fitting that this year we welcome Dave himself as our Robert Fine lecturer. Before I invite Dave to the stage, allow me to introduce him properly. Dr. Dave Rich, MBE, is one of Britain's foremost authorities on anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and political extremism. He has worked at the Community Security Trust since 1994 and now serves as its Director of Policy, shaping national understanding of anti-Semitic trends and supporting victims of hate crime. Dave completed his PhD at the Peirce Institute for the Study of Anti-Semitism at Birkbeck, University of London in 2015. His doctoral work was on Zionist and anti-Zionist political protest and student activism in Britain, 1968-1986. Dave is also a research fellow at our center and serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Contemporary Antisemitism. His major works, including Everyday Hate, along with many, many academic essays, have become indispensable guides to understanding the dynamics of antisemitism in the United Kingdom and beyond. But his contributions also extend beyond academia. He has written for major international newspapers and journals, and he serves on key national advisory bodies on hate crime. Earlier this year, he was awarded the honor of Member of the Order of the British Empire for his outstanding service to the Jewish community and to the public understanding of extremism and anti-Semitism. But I would like to end on a memorial or more personal reflection, with a more personal reflection. In the months since October 7, when the British Jewish community has experienced unprecedented levels of fear, anger, and isolation, Dave's regular short commentaries on Substack, Everyday Hate, have become a source of clarity and, importantly, of steadiness. They have helped articulate the deep anxiety of British Jews, not as an abstraction, but as a lived daily reality. For me, and I believe for many people in this room, his writing has offered something rare, a voice that corrects distortions and half-truths circulating in mainstream media, and that explains without simplifying, a voice confronting painful realities without surrendering to despair. And Dave shared with me that these commentaries might be published soon. In addition, Dave has been one of the few public intellectuals willing to interrogate carefully the phenomenon of Holocaust inversion after October 7, a topic he addressed in a paper, "The Holocaust Cannot Mean Whatever You Want It to Mean." With the same forensic precision and clarity, Dave most recently discussed the Prescott Report on the BBC. It is exactly the kind of intellectually nuanced and ethically grounded work that Robert Fine himself would have admired for his scholarship, courage, and contribution to public understanding of anti-Semitism at the moment of profound communal vulnerability. It is a privilege to welcome him tonight. Dr. Dave Rich, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for that very generous introduction. And thank you, David, for inviting me. It's an honor to be able to honor Robert Fine tonight. And thank you to everyone for coming. We're here to talk about anti-Semitism, obviously. But I'm going to start by talking about Star Wars. Bear with me. I'm not going completely off-piste. Look, as I'm sure we all know, Star Wars tells the story of a heroic resistance against a fascistic empire that commits genocide at the touch of a button through its planet-sized weapon, the Death Star. And this Death Star has a fatal flaw, a small hole in the side, and if you fire a rocket into that hole, then you blow up the entire Death Star, you avert impending genocide, and you lift the imperial jackboot from the necks of free peoples everywhere. Now, this is the metaphor that the Irish actress Denise Gough, who is starring in a Star Wars TV spin-off, reached for a few weeks ago when she wanted to explain why defeating Israel is the key to ending all global suffering. She said, the Death Star is like all of it. Sudan, Congo, Nigeria, she named these countries, all of it everywhere. And Palestine is like that small hole, the weak point of the entire imperial system. And if we can free Palestine, she said, it explodes everything and ends imperial oppression everywhere. Well, so the novelist Pankaj Mishra made a similar argument, albeit in more highbrow terms, in his recent book, The World After Gaza, where he argued that the war in Israel and Gaza is of a different quality and significance than any other on earth. Not because of the scale of death and destruction, the longevity of the war, or the depth of Western involvement, but simply and solely because Israel is Jewish. Only the Jews, Mishra wrote in his book, straddle humanity's deepest fault lines. In the last century, he wrote, between religious tradition and secular modernity, capitalism and socialism, democracy and totalitarianism. And now, in the form of Israel, between Arabs and Jews, global North and global South, and white and non-white peoples. Therefore, the Jewish state, he wrote, is of great and ominous significance for all of humanity. And it is Israel, not Trump's America or Putin's Russia or Xi's China, which is causing a collapse of the free world. Okay, one more example. In August last year, this is my favorite of the three, Michael Fakhri, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food and a professor at the University of Oregon School of Law, published a report titled Palestine and the Right to Food, which argued that, and I'm quoting again, The tools and techniques that will free the Palestinian people from occupation, oppression, and exploitation will ultimately be the same ones that can free us all. Now, he was writing about hunger and the global food industry, and it's the same claim, the same belief that freeing Palestine frees the world, but in this case, it promises us liberation from the harms done by industrialized agriculture and processed foods. Even this, it seems, could be overcome if only Gaza were free. Most of the world's population, he explained, suffer under food systems that harm or kill them through slower forms of violence than in Gaza today. And by fighting Israel's starvation campaign against the Palestinians, I'm still quoting, people are in effect also fighting for their own freedom from hunger. Now, this report was in the form of a graphic novel that is hosted on the website of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. It's still there today. And it is made up of vivid cartoon drawings which show a multi-headed dragon with each head labeled as capitalism, imperialism, racism, patriarchy, fascism, and extractivism. And this dragon is also drawn as Israel, breathing fire to burn Palestine. Now, it follows a rich and well-trodden tradition of anti-Semitic zoomorphism in which Jews are drawn as all sorts of beasts and monsters. But it's not the cartoon dragon that matters so much as the idea it represents, which is yet again that through defeating Israel, the path to ending world hunger can be unblocked, just as for Denise Goff, the liberation of Palestine will end conflict in Africa. And for Pankaj Mishra, it is only a Jewish state which holds up a mirror to humanity. Now, I have no idea what the people making these arguments think is the material basis for these claims. I find it very implausible, to say the least, that if the IDF lift restrictions on Gazan fishermen, it will somehow bring about an end to agricultural deforestation in Brazil. But these aren't really material claims at all. They are just modern expressions of a persistent and an enduring belief that Jews, in one form or another, are like the keystone in the arch that holds up civilization. And if you want to bring the existing order crashing down and replace it with something radically transformative, you have to first remove this Jewish influence, or at least take away its power. Now, this idea was at the heart of what used to be called the Jewish question, which was the subject of Robert Fine's last book, written with Philip Spencer, who's here tonight, published in 2017. Called Antisemitism and the Left, it had the prescient subtitle On the Return of the Jewish Question. And this was the question about the status and the rights of Jews that gripped the thinking of European intellectuals and politicians and philosophers in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Robert and Philip described this Jewish question as, quote, not just an attitude of hostility to Jews or to those who invoke the sign of the Jews, which is an important distinction, but a theory designed to explain the winners and losers of capitalist society. It was a theory based on the idea that Jews play a special role in other people's stories, and that the fate of the Jews has a different quality and meaning than the fate of other peoples. Now, this is part of Europe's intellectual and cultural and political history. But why does it matter now? This Jewish question largely disappeared from Europe's intellectual life after the Shoah. It wasn't that anti-Semitism itself had disappeared, of course. The worst anti-Jewish riots in modern British history were in 1947, just 2 years after the BBC had broadcast the liberation of Belsen. The Soviet Union and its communist satellites used anti-Semitism as a tool of internal control and internationally as a tool of subversion throughout the Cold War. Anti-Semitic attitudes are, and have been for many years, common in Muslim-majority countries, and indeed in some Muslim communities in the West. And Islamist movements regularly place anti-Jewish conspiracies at the heart of their explanations for the repeated failings of the Islamic world during the 20th century. So anti-Semitism itself never disappeared. But in general, in Western societies, it lost its power to explain. and its ability to mobilize millions behind a political project. Anti-Semitism was defeated along with the Nazis, put on trial at Nuremberg, and pronounced guilty not just of crimes against Jews, but against humanity. It became a subject of history, memorialized through Anne Frank and Oskar Schindler, lampooned by Mel Brooks and Larry David, but not a relevant factor in the shaping of today's world. And the fact that it's come back is a reminder that what matters is not just the presence of anti-Semitism itself, but when it is put to work in support of a wider political program. Those days, for a few decades at least, seem to have gone, until now. It turns out that anti-Semitism does not give up so easily. I'm sure I don't need to revise the catalogue of anti-Jewish violence and hatred that has swept around the world over the past 2 years. We saw it most tragically and most recently in Manchester on Yom Kippur, adding Heaton Park to Washington, D.C., Boulder, and the UAE as sites of anti-Jewish murder since October 7th. And before then, Pittsburgh, Paris, Copenhagen, Toulouse, and many others too. Bigotry of all types exists everywhere, but there is no other form of hatred that operates globally in such a synchronized fashion. Synagogues have been burnt on 5 continents since October 7th. Whenever I mention that in an article or an interview, that's always the statistic that gets fact-checked. Really? 5 continents? We weren't aware of that, is what I normally get back. And the answer is yes, 5, more than once in most occasions. But the fact that people, especially from left-leaning media outlets, as these were, don't have this front and center of their kind of mental anti-racist landscape, it isn't populating their social media feeds and their political conversations, that in itself speaks volumes. Then there's the daily stuff, the too small to make the news anti-Semitism. A friend's son recently started at university, went to a freshers' night at a local club, got chatting to a girl until she saw his Star of David necklace, said, "Oh, you're Jewish," and walked off. Every Jewish person has either experienced this kind of thing themselves in the past 2 years, knows someone who has, or knows of someone who has. According to the Institute for Jewish Policy Research, 32% of British Jews personally experienced direct anti-Semitism last year. Not just saw it online, but personally, directly at them. That's what normalizing anti-Semitism looks like. And it isn't just the personal comments, but the way it's become a familiar and regular part of mainstream politics and media. Does everyone here watch Loose Women? One of its regular stars, Nadia Sawalha, took to social media recently to defend Louis Theroux after his interview with Bobby Villan, one half of Bob Villan. And she defended Louis Theroux from what she called the group of people who live by their pound of flesh rule. No prizes for guessing who she means. She went on, "So many of us are sick and tired of being bullied. The threat that has hung over our heads for years and years that we may be anti-Semitic, you've worn it out. There's a brashness, a kind of a daring sense of freedom in finally saying what needs to be said about the Jews." But this increase in the quantity and the availability of anti-Semitism isn't on its own the reason why it feels like the old Jewish question is rising from its political grave. It's that people are joining the dots. They are noticing Jews in the language of the American far right. People are reaching for explanations and descriptions of their world that place Jews and Jewishness and Jewish things at their center, with Israel and Zionism the most contemporary and most relevant manifestation of this today. Anti-Semitism is always dangerous for individuals, but this is what makes it dangerous for entire societies. I'll explain what I mean. Let's start in New York with Zohran Mamdani, mayor-elect, who said in 2023 that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF. Or Tucker Carlson, who, after Charlie Kirk was assassinated in September, gave a eulogy at the memorial service in which he compared Kirk's assassination to the crucifixion, the implication being the same people were responsible for both. Or Louis Theroux, who I mentioned, who, when interviewing Bobby Villan, mused on how Jewish identity, these are his words, has become almost like an acceptable way of understanding ethno-nationalism, and that they are prototyping an aggressive militarized form of this ethno-nationalism. And according to Theroux, it is post-Holocaust Jewish exceptionalism or Zionist exceptionalism that has become a role model for Orban and Trump and similar political figures elsewhere. Now, you don't need to be from any political or any particular background to do this. Tucker Carlson is a right-wing Christian nationalist. Zoran Mamdani is a left-wing secular Muslim. Louis Theroux is a British liberal. The theory that Zionists were to blame for the post-Southport riots last summer was shared by, amongst others, David Miller, Cage International, Matt Kennard of left-wing Declassified TV, the Islamic Human Rights Commission, and the American white supremacist and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes. Now, on one level, this is just regular conspiracy mongering, right? You find something bad that is happening, you blame Jews or Zionists or Israel, and you move along. But I think that there are deeper patterns at play here. So let's go back to Louis Theroux. He blamed Israel and Jewish exceptionalism, his phrase, for the fact that Viktor Orban champions a narrow, ethnically exclusive form of nationalism in Hungary, and that Trump's America has seen a resurgence of white identity politics. But Hungary does not need the Jews to teach it ethno-nationalism. The Hungarian nation-state that emerged from the Austro-Hungarian Empire between the two world wars was constructed out of legalized ethno-nationalism. Laws were passed to restrict access to higher education and key professions for Jews and non-Magyar ethnic groups. You could even argue the entire map of Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkans is the result of a century of ethno-nationalist wars, ethnic cleansing, and nation building. If Viktor Orban wants inspiration for his version of a narrow ethnic film of nationalism and to incorporate that into government, Europe has its own authentic native traditions for him to draw on. Much of this history is forgotten now, and that's the point. Instead, there's a need for a collective amnesia so that the borders we now have feel permanent and peaceful relations can develop, but all that suppressed guilt has to go somewhere. So it's Jewish exceptionalism that gets the blame for East European ethno-nationalism, as if Europe needs the Jews to teach it such a thing. Similarly, when Donald Trump talks of America first, it's an indigenous American tradition that he is harking back to. Neither Orban nor Trump need Jews or Israel to teach them these things. As for Mamdani's claim that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF, the idea that American police forces need to learn racist brutality from Israelis, that without Israel such abuses would not happen in the United States, is grotesque. This is scapegoating in its fullest and most traditional sense. Rather than confront the dark past and guilty secrets of Western societies, far better to load all those sins onto the traditional scapegoat and just cast it out into the wilderness. But whereas in the biblical fable, the purpose of the scapegoat was to heal divisions within society, this version has the opposite effect. Let's return to Mamdani and his quote in full, because I think it tells us a lot. He said, "I think that for anyone to care about these issues, we have to make them hyper-local. We have to make clear that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF." There's that quote. And then he went on. "For working-class people who have very little time, who have so many stresses, who are under so many pressures, there isn't that much time for symbolism. We have to make it materially connected to their life." How, though, I wonder, is the IDF materially connected to the lives of New Yorkers? It reminds me of a speech by Dr. Rama Aladwan, who was one of the NHS's anti-Semitic doctors, in Leeds last August at a rally in the city centre. She said, "It isn't only Palestine that's occupied by Zionism. Our Western governments are occupied themselves by Zionism," and she defined Zionism as Jewish supremacy. And Jewish communities, she said, must be held accountable. Or as Dr. Aladwan tweeted just last month, and remember she's Palestinian, "For any nation to be truly sovereign, we must free Palestine and the entire world from Jewish supremacy." It isn't hard to see I think, how suggesting to people in the West that the problems in their lives are caused one way or another by Zionist meddling can encourage the idea that there is a hidden Jewish hand pulling the strings and lacing the boots that oppress you, ordinary person, in New York or Leeds or elsewhere. We've seen this way of thinking before, and it even acquired a name of its own from that same period when the Jewish question became a meaningful part of European politics. The idea that anti-Semitism can be somehow leveraged to bring people to left-wing politics became known as the socialism of fools. And it's just as foolish and just as dangerous in the 21st century as it was in the 19th. You start off by telling ordinary people that Israeli oppression is materially connected to their life in America or Britain. Next, you make much grander claims that freeing Palestine will bring peace to Africa, solve world hunger, and end global injustice and inequality. And as soon as people ask how or why these things are connected, you open the door to a whole world of anti-Semitic conspiracism that just flows straight in. Some people, like Nick Fuentes, do this because they're true believers. Others, I think, are more cynical in their wielding of Israel and Gaza as a touchstone issue. They can see its power. Perhaps they don't truly understand why it is so, but they just can't resist using it anyway. To paraphrase Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, I'm really getting my movie references in tonight. They are so preoccupied with whether they could use Israel as a way of attracting and energizing supporters. They don't stop to think if they should. But a lot of people struggle to grasp the symbolic role that Jews and now Israel play in other people's understanding of the world. Michael Gove was on The Rest is Politics recently, and he made a point I've heard him and many other people make several times. He said, history teaches us certain lessons, and one of those lessons is that the safety and security of the Jewish community in any country at any time is the surest guide to how admirable and liberal that country is. And Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell just laughed at him. They couldn't understand why the treatment of Jews had any greater meaning than the treatment of anyone else. Rory Stewart looked completely bemused, even more bemused than normal, and asked, but why, logically? And I understand the question, but the whole point is that it isn't logical. It's symbolic. It draws on ideas and instincts about Jews that are buried deep in our culture and our thinking, and it emerges especially at times when society is under the most stress. Just look at our streets. For the past 2 years, they have been taken over by different protest movements, one bearing the flag of this country, the other carrying the flag of Palestine. They are opposing movements in many ways. One is patriotic, the other supports the national demands of a foreign people. One is mostly white and working class, the other is mostly Muslim and middle class. One calls for an end to immigration, the other calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. We focus on their specific demands as if meeting their material claims would satisfy their needs, but really, they're both hoping for a different kind of Britain entirely, for a new world remade around their own identities, their sense of who they are, and both, directly or indirectly, relate this to the status of Jews, real or imagined, here or in Israel. The pro-Palestine movement is obviously and explicitly about Israel. The other street movement, the one with the British flags, is led by Tommy Robinson, who recently tried to position himself as Israel's new supposed best friend. And just a word about that. When Kanye West went on his anti-Semitic rant 3 years ago, Robinson wrote a long essay called The Jewish Question, that phrase again. He wrote a long essay supporting Kanye West. Jews do control Hollywood and the music industry, Tommy Robinson wrote. Kanye has a point, and these Jews need to change their behavior. So his supposed support for Jews and Israel is very, very conditional. He's completely open about this. He has a fixed idea of how that Jews should behave only in ways that support his politics and his aims, and he will attack, not just abandon, but attack any Jews who behave in any way he disapproves of. The irony is that some of the Jews who support Robinson, mainly in America and Israel rather than here, also call for Jewish unity. But you can't do both, because Robinson is very happy to divide Jews into good and bad and set each against the other. He's no kind of friend at all. Now, on the other side of these rival but kind of parallel movements, stands Charlotte Church, who described the pro-Palestine movement as the biggest spiritual quest of our time, and said taking part in pro-Palestine activism was a deeply spiritual experience for her. And it's a revealing way of putting things. If the pro-Palestine movement was not related in some way to Jews and Jewishness and the role these concepts play in our world, I don't think it would resonate at a spiritual level at all. Now, whenever anti-Israel campaigners are challenged on why they devote so much time and energy and emotion to the issue of Israel and Palestine, rather than any other situation of appalling suffering around the world, they usually give more material, less spiritual explanations. They point to the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, the complicity of Western governments, Britain's colonial legacy, these kind of things. But all of these factors also apply to, let's say, Sudan. In fact, far more so, on all three counts. The number of people killed, displaced, and hungry in Sudan is substantially higher than in Gaza. The amount of arms sold by Britain to the UAE, which is generally regarded as the sponsor of the force committing most of the atrocities in Sudan, far outweighs the amounts sold by Britain to Israel. And as for colonialism, some of the most famous events and people in British imperial history happened in Sudan. But none of this counts in the same way, because Sudan carries no spiritual resonance in Western civilization and no symbolic role in our politics. There has never been a Sudanese question in European thought. The formative stories of Western civilization, the font of our moral and cultural identity, are found instead in Judaism and in the land of Israel. I think this is what Pankaj Mishra meant when he wrote that conflicts involving Israel have this unique relevance for humanity. There is only one Holy Land. There is only one Jerusalem. There are lots of other things that feed into the obsessive focus on Israel, but this is its origin point. Now, we don't stop often enough to acknowledge just how weird this all is. The idea that the status of Jews, such a numerically insignificant people, and Israel, a tiny nation in territory and population, should play such an outsized role on a global canvas is something we become used to, but it remains quite odd. David Nirenberg made a similar point in a recent edition of Joe Glanville's book of essays on anti-Semitism. He said, "We struggle to meet the challenge of understanding anti-Semitism's appeal because we always get stuck on reality. In the last century," he said, "Hannah Arendt tried to understand anti-Semitism through economics. The Jews are hated because they're so rich. And in this century, today, it's about Israel. The Jews are hated because Israel is a colonial, occupying apartheid state." But, Nirenberg said, the real is not the actual driver of this logic. And he's right. Anti-Semitism is not rooted in reality. Either it's entirely a fiction, or it takes a partial reality and reshapes it into unrecognizable fantasy. But sometimes our inability to think beyond reality, not only do we fail to meet this challenge, but it reaches the point of self-parody. Last month, an academic called Dr. Samar Makusi gave a talk to the Students for Justice in Palestine Society at UCL, in which she included an actual blood libel as fact. Dr. Makusi told the story of the Damascus blood libel of 1840, except she told it not as fiction but as fact, that Jews really do use non-Jewish blood in our religious rituals, as evidence of the malevolence of Jews within a much longer anti-Semitic diatribe in this lecture. And she got her facts wrong. Instead of saying that Jews use non-Jewish blood to bake matzah at Passover, she said we use it to make pancakes at Shavuot. And some people went on social media to correct her on this point. Jewish people, who I really respect, while condemning her, said, "No, you've got it wrong. It's not pancakes at Shavuot, it's matzah at Pesach." And I was thinking, that's not the problem here. In a darkly comic twist, before this academic did her PhD at UCL, she used to work at UNRWA, of course. But when we analyze anti-Semitism, we do this a lot. We fall into the mistake of being too rational, too analytical. It's a strange thing to say at an academic event, I know, but rational analysis has a limited capacity to explain what is fundamentally an irrational phenomenon. So yes, we can laugh at Dr. Marcusi, but she is an educated woman, an academic with a PhD who had recently completed a research post at UCL, which is one of the top 10 universities in the world. And she was teaching the blood libel as fact. And it begs the question, why, time and again, do people fall for this stuff? Remember Robert Fine and Philip Spencer's definition of the Jewish question, a theory designed to explain the winners and losers of capitalist society. The past 2 decades have seen increasing numbers of losers, from globalization, from the 2008 economic crash, the pandemic, the cost of housing, the AI squeeze on graduate jobs, and the rest. And when we look back through history, we see similar economic and social causes cropping up in different eras. The international system that has remained relatively stable for 80 years since World War II is in crisis, and liberal democracy is stumbling, to say the least. Now, Israel is not the reason for any of this, and it may be bad luck or just circumstance that a catastrophic war in Israel and Gaza came at just this exact moment. But it certainly sharpens anti-Semitism's explanatory pull. And there is danger for all of us in this moment, for sure. But this only explains why capitalism's losers fall for the same anti-Jewish myths and libels generation after generation. It doesn't answer a more challenging question. Why do winners fall for it? Tucker Carlson is far too influential and wealthy and connected to be considered a loser. Quite the opposite. Zoran Mamdani is very much a winner now. Anti-Semitism becomes popular at times, yes, because it satisfies people's resentments, but it also becomes popular because it is genuinely useful. We think of anti-Semitism as shameful and disreputable, an aberration from the normal functioning of society. And therefore, we mistakenly assume that intelligent, well-informed, successful people would naturally shy away from it. But it is such an enduring tradition in Western thought that that is clearly not the case. Instead, as David Nirenberg explained so persuasively in his book Anti-Judaism, it's more helpful to recognize that at times, this kind of thinking about Jews has proven to be a valuable stand-in for much bigger and more important and more volatile points of division. What people think of Jews and Jewish things, and in today's world that very much centers on Israel, demarcates deeper social and political dividing lines. The MAGA movement in the United States is currently falling out with itself over whether anti-Semitism and Hitler admiration are welcome within the Republican Party. The immediate focus of this is about whether Tucker Carlson should have platformed Nick Fuentes on his podcast, with Fuentes being an open anti-Semite who has said he is on Team Hitler. And indeed, there is a broader argument in that world over whether it was Churchill, not Hitler, who was the real villain of World War II. Seriously. But what this represents is a more profound disagreement, not about Jews per se, but about what kind of country America should be, whether it will always be a country of immigrants or whether it will turn its back on the world, and whether Western civilization is Judeo-Christian or Christian nationalist. These are profound questions that play out through the vector of Jews and discussions about Jewish things. You can see similar things in British politics. A poll last month by the think tank More in Common showed that ex-Labour voters looking for a new political home go primarily to Reform if they support Israel and to the Greens if they support the Palestinians. Now, most of them are not making their decision on this basis, but it is a reliable indicator of what else they think. And of course, at the last general election, 4 independent Muslim MPs won parliamentary seats by running campaigns that used Gaza to appeal directly to Muslim voters on the basis of their Muslim identity. Now, other issues were in play in those elections, similar kind of disenchantment and frustration with politics, so that felt by voters across society. But it was only Gaza that could mobilize enough votes to actually win the seats. Now, for a long time, this way of thinking lost its purchase in mainstream society. Ordinary people just weren't interested. I don't think we can say that anymore. A combination of profound changes in global and national politics and the way that myths and lies are pumped around society by manipulated social media algorithms means that lots of people are thinking and talking about Jews and Jewish things, which includes Israel and the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, who never gave those issues much thought at all previously. Now, it is impossible to separate all of this from everything that has happened since Hamas stormed into Israel on the morning of 7th of October 2023, slaughtered 1,200 people and took 251 hostages. That was a seismic day, not only for Israel and for Palestinians, but for all Jews everywhere. And it is telling that the recent ceasefire agreement and the prospect of some kind of shaky peace left much of the pro-Palestinian movement in this country disappointed. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign condemned Trump's 21-point peace plan that led to the ceasefire as a continuation of Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, in their words. A reminder that Israel will be accused of genocide whatever it does. And it's an example of how, for this movement, Israel exists in a category of one where common words take on unique meanings that apply to Israel alone. Apartheid, genocide, colonialism, refugee. These words enter a kind of weird Alice in Wonderland-style vortex of meaning when applied to Israel. Now here too, people respond to the genocide charge through facts and data. How many civilians have been killed versus how many combatants, whether the IDF properly warns civilians to leave combat zones, and so on and so on. Israel's supporters take this charge of genocide on its face as an evidence-based allegation of a crime and try to construct the case for the defense. But there is no defense because the charge is not made on that basis or for that purpose. Instead, it has this symbolic, unreal quality. Paul Weller recently said, Paul Weller, the musician, he has a deeply held and non-negotiable belief that the state of Israel was committing genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza, and that this belief is a central part of his moral and philosophical worldview. Now, he said this for a legal case, and I don't know if he really believes it or not, but I guess if it was in a legal document, he must mean it. And it's a remarkable way of putting it, that the belief Israel is committing genocide does not depend on the evidence for or against, because if it did, it could change, but is a non-negotiable belief and a philosophical worldview. And what this reflects and represents is a broader anti-Zionism that is not about criticizing the Israeli government, but that defines Israel not as a legitimate nation state at all, much less as an expression of authentic Jewish nationhood, but as an artificial creation of Western imperialism, a colonial entity on stolen land that can never achieve permanence, no matter how many generations of Israelis live and die there. In this anti-Zionist world, the term genocide has shed its legal meaning and become a political label, whose antithesis is the political label of resistance. And these two terms, genocide and resistance, represent two states of being. In a colonial setting, either you're engaging in genocide or you are resisting it. There is no middle ground. So therefore, Israel is condemned as genocidal, not by observation, but through logical deduction. Israel is colonial, therefore, by definition, it is genocidal. It cannot be otherwise. And in this thinking, Gaza represents resistance against the entire Western colonial and capitalist power structure. This is the central principle of anti-Zionism today, the idea that runs through it like a stick of rock. But what is it for, actually? What is the anti-Zionist movement for? If we strip away the political sloganeering and the academic ambiguities, it is a plot to kill a nation. That's it. Anti-Zionism is a campaign across decades and continents to kill the nation of Israel, erase its name and its national identity from history, and replace it with something non-Jewish. And whether this campaign is pursued through ballistic missiles and suicide bombers, seminars and journals, or street protests and placards, that is its goal. Now again, this is so odd. I cannot think of another campaign of such historical length, global reach, size, duration and depth, all constructed to justify, call for, and bring about the elimination of an existing nation state against the wishes of most of its citizens. Not to simply change its laws or constitution, but to eliminate it entirely. Again, anti-Zionism is utterly unique, and it is fundamentally anti-democratic. This uniqueness is what true Jewish exceptionalism is about. It's the one applied not by Jews in Israel, but to them, by others, who hold them to a higher standard and treat them in singular ways. But then the Jewish question was never really about how Jews behave at all, but a question of how other people think about Jews. It is at its heart an anti-Semitic question, not a Jewish one. Now, this rejection of Israel's existence is the cornerstone of Hamas's program, and for them it is a principle of religious belief. Palestine is Muslim land and can never be ruled by Jews. Or as the Hamas Charter puts it, the land of Palestine is an Islamic waqf, consecrated for future Muslim generations until Judgment Day. Now, this fact is usually missing from Western analyses of Hamas's motivations and outlook, but it's absolutely essential to understanding what they're about. And interestingly, the anti-Zionist idea that Israel is a colonial entity that can never acquire legitimacy brings the Western left into line with this Islamist thinking on the impossibility of Jewish sovereignty on any part of the land of Palestine. Whereas Hamas believe that Palestine is Muslim land and can never be ruled by Jews, so Western anti-Zionists argue that Palestine is Arab land and similarly can never be ruled by Jews because Jews in this framing are white European colonizers. The discourse differs, although not by that much, but the underlying instinct and the end result are the same. And I cannot think of a more fitting slogan for this movement than death to the IDF. I've been asked a few times whether death to the IDF, this slogan that Bob Villan came up at Glastonbury and was broadcast on the BBC, whether this is an anti-Semitic slogan or not. And my answer is always, why does that matter? He's calling for death. Isn't that enough? And the question almost implies that calling for death is somehow less abominable if it's only applied to Israel. But wanting to see an entire nation disappear is a racist position anyway, whether it fits a classical definition of anti-Semitism or not. When Bobby Villan went on Louis Theroux's podcast, they had a whole discussion about this slogan and whether he meant that every Israeli soldier should be killed. Spoiler alert, he did, because that's what he said at his concert at Ali Pali the month before Glastonbury. Or whether, as Louis Theroux helpfully suggested to him, he just meant an end to the institution of the IDF. But even this is no better, because what would it mean if Israel had no army? We saw what it meant on the morning of October 7th, when the IDF was overrun and for a few hours did not respond and Hamas had free reign in southern Israel. So we saw what it meant. No IDF means the mass slaughter of Jews in the name of jihad. Now, this anti-Zionism also brings with it outright and at times straightforward prejudice towards Israel as a nation and Israelis as a people, which is becoming openly embraced and accepted within progressive politics. The More in Common poll that I mentioned earlier did a really interesting thing. It found that 30% of what they call progressive activists, and I'll explain that in a moment, have a negative view of Israeli citizens, not of the Israeli government, that was much higher, but just of all Israelis, 30%. And this made these progressive activists more prejudiced than any other part of British society on the specific question of Israel and Palestine. I'll explain what I mean. More in Common have this neat way of polling the British population where they divide people into different segments depending on their income, their politics, their interests, and all sorts of other stuff. And they define progressive activists as these are the people who work for charities and NGOs and in the public sector. They're younger than average, they're highly educated, they're politically engaged, they're left-wing. These are who everyone else will call woke, basically. And when More in Common asked people whether they feel negatively about Israeli or Palestinian people, not the governments, just ordinary Israelis and Palestinians, it was the progressive activists who came out the most prejudiced of all. 30% said they feel negatively towards Israelis, only 24% felt positively. It made them more racist towards Israelis than the most right-wing segment in the poll was towards Palestinians. Now, it made me think of some years ago, Rusi Jaspal, who was a professor now, I think, at University of Brighton, did some groundbreaking research showing how for a selection of young British Muslims, strong support for Palestinians and a deep loathing for Israel and Zionism, often expressed in explicitly anti-Semitic language, had formed part of their Muslim identity. It wasn't just a foreign policy stance. It was an expression of their own sense of self and their place in British society and in the world as Muslims. And I think we're seeing something similar going on here with the totemic role that anti-Zionism now plays for many young progressive activists. It's as if anti-Zionism has become a political identity in and of itself, with all the contempt and the suspicion that brings for Israelis and indirectly, therefore, for Jews. A previous More in Common poll found 27% of progressive activists would never campaign alongside someone who supports Israel's right to exist, even on a completely unrelated issue. These are the people who want to exclude Zionist performers from concert venues and comedy clubs, with the suspicion, of course, always falling on the Jewish comedians and the Jewish musicians. And these are the people who will be running our cultural institutions and our public bodies 20 years from now. This prejudice towards Israelis is racism hiding in plain sight as anti-racism. And I don't know whether our existing language and understanding of anti-Semitism is fully able to describe and explain it. But the fact that it may not meet a classical definition of anti-Semitism doesn't diminish its potential harm. And we should be wary of feeling bound by language designed for a different age. The historian Mark Mazower recently published a history of the word anti-Semitism that started its history in the mid-19th century, as if it's the word that matters more than the phenomenon that it describes. But the world has moved on. The condition of the Jewish people has changed, and the meaning of anti-Semitism needs to adapt and modernize to remain relevant, or it will just be superseded by newer language that is a better fit for what we face today, in the same way as the word anti-Semitism emerged in the 1870s to describe how modern racialized Jew hatred differed from its predecessors. Now, it is strangely fitting, I think, that this latest incarnation of anti-Jewish racism finds its expression within the supposed anti-racism of progressive politics, because it was the Black Lives Matter movement that hardened and politicized racial identities for a new generation. That experience, that period, taught young progressives, amongst other things, that people are defined by racial categories and that only structural discrimination directed at people of color is real racism. More than that, it encouraged the view that all oppression and inequality is due to white supremacy, which manifests through structural racism at home and colonialism around the world. Now, this leaves little room for the ways that anti-Jewish racism actually manifests. And even worse, I think there is a clear discursive link in the way that between the rise of BLM, the increase in discussions of white supremacy in domestic politics, and the growth in usage of the phrase Jewish supremacy as a synonym for Zionism, first in Israel, but inevitably around the world too. There is some irony in this, of course, that the biggest global anti-racist movement in recent years normalized an anti-Semitic phrase that in European and North American politics had previously been the preserve of David Duke and other white supremacists, and made it commonplace on the progressive anti-racist left. But ironic or not, the impact has been to bring parts of Western anti-Zionism into line with genuinely neo-Nazi thinking about Jews. Back in 1962, CST's predecessor, the 62 Group, was founded by Jewish anti-fascists after the National Socialist movement held a rally in Trafalgar Square under a banner reading "Free Britain from Jewish Control." And today, Dr. Rama Aladwan and David Miller and others operate under the slogan, "Free Britain from Jewish supremacy." These are literally the words they use. Placards and banners claiming the British government is under Zionist control are common on anti-Israel protests. And of course, they echo the old far-right idea of Zog, that we all live under a Zionist-occupied government. It's remarkable how easily this old neo-Nazi language has nestled into modern anti-Zionist politics. More and more people in the anti-Israel movement are using the language of Jewish supremacy and Zionist control, not in relation to Palestine, but to describe how they understand their own societies at home. The language is radicalizing because the politics is doing the same. Even Jeremy Corbyn now stands accused within his own party of not being sufficiently anti-Zionist. Rama Al-Adwan, who is Palestinian herself, don't forget, recently tweeted that it is more important to be anti-Zionist than to be pro-Palestine. Why? Because being pro-Palestine only frees Palestine. Being anti-Zionist frees the entire world. Incidentally, Nick Griffin, the former BNP leader, said in an interview this week that the only way we can decolonize Britain is to decolonize the whole world. I'm not interested in freeing Palestine from the river to the sea. I want the whole world free of Zionist influence. It's identical. And at the other end of the horseshoe, the people pushing anti-Semitic ideas on the American right, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, have incorporated hostility to Israel and Zionism into their more traditional anti-Semitic commentaries. Now, this identification of Jewish supremacy as the problem, married up with the kind of purifying fervor of anti-Zionism, is, I suspect, what lay behind Peter Beinart's recent humbling. Peter Beinart is an American Jewish writer and activist who has journeyed from liberal Zionism to anti-Zionism. He repeatedly denounces Jewish supremacy, in his words. His book, a recent book, Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, admonishes Jews who cling to what he calls the theology of Jewish statehood. And he's long supported the boycott movement. Now, he probably thought all of this put him on safe ground when he decided recently to go to Israel to give a lecture to Israeli students at Tel Aviv University. But he was wrong, and he was forced into a humiliating apology to his wider anti-Zionist, pro-Palestine following. It was not enough that he was going to deliver an anti-Zionist message in the heart of the Zionist entity. The problem, which he may still not have grasped, I don't know, is that he genuinely, for all his anti-Zionism, does care about Jewish lives and Jewish well-being. His book, actually, is a plea for Jewish liberation, which he believes can be achieved through abandoning Jewish statehood. But what he missed is that anti-Zionism, as it largely manifests today, has no interest in liberating Jews or protecting Jewish lives or Jewish interests. It seeks to purify the world through the elimination of Zionism. Zionism means Jewish power, and Peter Beinart is a powerful Jew. And even as a Jewish anti-Zionist, he fell foul of this. Now, incidentally, to bring us back to the beginning, he ended his book with that same old plea, that same old prophecy, that for Jews, if we liberate ourselves from supremacy, so as partners with Palestinians, we can help liberate the world. Again, this idea that the future of humanity rests on the fate of the Jews. Where does this leave us? What do we make of all this? Now, having begun by warning against the whole concept of a Jewish question, about using Jews as a filter through which to understand and shape the world, I'm now going to turn that equation around and say this. Defending Jews from anti-Semitism is part of the work of defending liberal democracy. It's not sufficient on its own, and I don't mean it in a symbolic way. I mean it in a very real, material, practical way. Anti-Semitism is built on conspiracy theories, myths, and lies. It is fundamentally illiberal and undemocratic. The work of the London Centre draws on this basic idea, and what the Centre is doing in academia, also needs to be done in politics, in education, in arts and culture, and beyond. It's essential. Despite everything, I've always thought that Britain retains its basic decency out there amongst normal people beyond activist land. And I still believe, with good reason, that this is the case. But history tends not to be made by the silent masses. They are on our side, but they won't lead this fight. That job falls on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for this powerful and insightful lecture about contemporary anti-Jewish discourses and anti-Jewish symbolic violence in a broader global cultural and political context. I would now like to open the floor for questions. We have only 10 minutes. So I would like everybody to abstain from making long comments. And I'm sure that many of you are eager to engage with Dave. So please ask short questions so as many of you can engage with Dave. I will take first 3 questions. The gentleman over here, the gentleman over there, and the lady.
Dave, thanks very much for a very informative presentation. Really, a couple of questions all sort of rolled into one. One is that your description of the problem seems to be focused much more on the sort of emotional appeal of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which kind of puts it back to us that we often, as you've said yourself, often think that we can respond with rational arguments. So, but how do you think we can deal with the emotional nature? There is certainly a view I've heard is that, and I think you did refer to it in your Peter Beinart remarks, that there are some people in the Jewish community think the answer is to disassociate the Jewish community more visibly from Israel and the policies of the Israeli government. And lastly, I think you also made the point about the terminology. I mean, I think a lot of us have found that calling anti-Zionists or anti-Semites anti-Semitic doesn't actually help, because basically you're justifying rather than countering. And of course they would then say that they're not racist at all, that they're just describing reality. So again, I mean, I think you raised the question about whether terminology is a problem and whether calling people anti-Semitic is necessarily a solution.
Yeah, I agreed with the vast majority of what you said, but what I didn't really buy was your argument that anti-Semitism is basically irrational, because something can be evil and terrible and bad, but still have a rationale to it. I mean, it seems to me that if you're going to explain anti-Semitism properly, rather than just kind of talk about it as being a kind of underlying prejudice, then you do need to try to investigate what the rationale is. And similarly, with the idea of scapegoating implies that the anti-Semites don't believe what they're saying. And I think what they're saying is absolutely evil, to be clear, but I think they genuinely believe it. And just to give one example, I think if you look at identity politics, this idea that the world is divided into different identity groups, there's a hierarchy of identities, and Jews are hyper-privileged because of that identity, then if you accept those premises, which I entirely don't, but if you do, then it seems to me that anti-Semitism is entirely rational. It flows from those completely flawed premises.
Thank you. That was brilliant, really enlightening. I think we've all got the same sort of question, really. I live in Bristol, and I had a conversation with a neighbour, which I'll very much paraphrase. Of course there's a genocide going on, to which I suggested facts and figures and suggested he looked at the high-level military group and blah, 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 blah. The conversation ended when he said, I don't care what facts and figures you give me, I'm not going to change my mind. Where can we go with that?
it's one of the features of the modern world. I think people don't change their mind about anything. And social media has a lot to do with that, I think. Look, all three questions sort of connect up. When we talk about rationality and irrationality, everyone is rational within their own frame of reference and understanding of the world, even if their understanding of the world is completely irrational. So conspiracy theorists act in a very rational way based on their understanding of the world. There's a guy got put in prison last year or the year before for blowing up 5G phone masts because he thought they were part of the Jewish system to control the country. Now, if he really believes that, that's a rational act. My point is, like, to a certain extent, we are always going to answer in facts and figures, and for, even almost for our own self-respect, it's important for us to say our case. But we shouldn't imagine that that will do the job, because quite often it won't, right? Because what is going on is people are reaching for ways of thinking about the world that answer a deeper need than simply a fact-based question. And I do think they believe it. When I say people are scapegoating, I don't think they're making it up. But I don't think they're fully aware that the patterns of thinking and the things they're reaching for that are coming into their heads and that are making sense to them are drawing on hundreds, even thousands of years of patterns of thinking about Jews and Jewish things that are deeply embedded into the way that our world is constructed. And we need to have that awareness. Now, how we deal with it, to a certain extent, part of the challenge for us is also emotional, right? There's the physical threat, and we have to deal with the physical threat. But how it makes us feel about it, and how we, Jewish or not, who care about this issue, go about society, go about our lives, and how it affects us or doesn't affect us, that is partly about how we react emotionally as well. It's not just about the facts and figures, and here's an article saying this, and here's an article saying that. So I think we have to recognize it operates at lots of different levels, and we have to respond at lots of different levels.
Yeah, so how do we fight this? Where do we sign up? The question is, how do we fight this? And where do we sign up?
Well, since we're here, I would say support the London Centre. Since I'm from CST, I'm going to say support CST. But there are lots of different organisations doing things, lots of different people doing things. You know, we can start with people we know and workplaces and so on. And so much of this is about, like, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes the starting point is individual conversations, you know. But there are lots of organisations in the community who are doing good work to tackle anti-Semitism, whether that's volunteering, whether it's supporting the centre, and so on. And I think part of the job of how we fight this is about being active. I think what has happened over the last 2 years is that a lot of people in the Jewish community have felt quite helpless. And like, we're under attack and we don't know what to do. And actually, we're not helpless. We are a pretty well-organized, pretty resourceful community with a lot of talented people and a lot of good organizations, and in some ways better placed than a lot of Jewish communities around the world to deal with these issues. So I think even just being on the front foot and being active will make it feel like there's a change.
Thanks a lot, an amazing speech, thank you. Just wanted to ask you about the term anti-Zionist, because what Zionist means to probably most of us in this room, Jewish right to a homeland, is not what most people who are thinking about Zionism may think what Zionism actually is. So, and they may see it as, you know, right-wing settlers going into Palestinian olive groves or whatever. So they may not see Zionism as I see it, which, and in the way I see it, I'm a Zionist, but I don't align with some of those very right-wing Zionists that we see. So do you think that there is a place for us either reclaiming the term or reinventing ourselves with a new term so that we can actually just, what do you think's the future for Zionism?
I mean, yes, I recognize all of those things. And you look at fewer people in the Jewish community are describing themselves as Zionists, but that doesn't necessarily come with they don't think Israel should exist. So does, right? I think we don't even need the word, actually. Israel exists. It's been around for long enough that basically nobody can remember a time when it didn't exist. And I do think some of the conversations from people saying maybe we'd be better off without Israel, like none of the people saying that know what it's like to live in a world without an Israel in it. I think that's important. It's there. It is a very successful state that has proven time and time again it's not going anywhere. It's a regional superpower. I don't know why even we need this quite impenetrable, weird, ideological word to describe the fact that we think, like every other country on earth, it's there. So I don't think we need it, and I think, whereas the sort of anti-Zionism I've described today is more of a sort of self-enclosed movement / belief system. And I know David some time ago stopped using the hyphen in anti-Zionism, because if we look at anti-Zionism as a thing, as a movement of extremism, I think that helps, maybe. So yeah, I just think I think it's not really a relevant or helpful word anymore. Yeah.
Okay, slightly depressing question, but I'd love to know your answer. I went to see a guy called Leo Pearlman speak recently, and I absolutely love everything he says, but at the end of the speech, he said, I don't believe our children will necessarily be in this country in 20 years, because we talked about where's the red line. I'd love to know what your thoughts on our children and grandchildren being in this country in 20 years. Because you talked about the liberals and the people who are going to be running the comedy shows and the arts and the music and the cultural. Are they going to forget that they're pro-Palestine in 20 years, or is it still a thing? So, yeah.
I'm more optimistic, but look, it's all relative, because, and this is obviously something a lot of people have been talking about and thinking about, and I was thinking, where are you going to go that's better? If people want to make Aliyah, great. If they want to go and live in Israel because they're Jewish and they want to live in a Jewish country, great. Are you physically safer in Israel than you are here? You know, who knows what's going to happen there in 20 years? Is any other diaspora community handling this stuff better? So I think rather than thinking there's an escape route to some fantasy island somewhere where anti-Semitism isn't a problem, and I really admire Leo, I think he's brilliant, I'm not criticizing him for this. I think it would be better for us as a community to focus our skills and our ability and our ingenuity on tackling this problem, because we do have a lot of things in our favor. Broadly speaking, most people in this country in the big picture are on our side. Like I said, they're not going to be the ones that stand up and do stuff, but that's the wider environment. I think there are some things which are changing in our favor a bit. There have been a few things recently where I've thought we're starting to get movement and action. For all that people complain about the police and the government and so on, they're broadly on our side, right? They are. So I think better as a community to focus on what we can do here, because no one knows what anything's going to be like anywhere in 20 years.
Dave, once again, thank you for your wonderful lecture, and we hope that it will be published soon. And I would like to thank the audience for being with us today. And I would like to also thank David Hirsch, the brain and the soul, the heart of the center, for everything he does. And all the other members of the center who contributed to this wonderful event, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. You can follow us on website, Facebook, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next Robert Fine Memorial Lecture in December 2026. Thank you very much.
Let me say very quickly before I let you go, some real warm thanks to our volunteers, to Danny Louise, who is our event organizer, to Martine, who's been doing brilliant work, to Joe de Geer, and thank you to all of you, and thank you especially to Dave Rich. And I have been asked to implore you to leave in good order and quietly, because we are in a residential neighborhood. Thank you very, very much, everybody.